Can't wait much longer, buddy, the young man said, his brittle smile beginning to turn down at the corners. I studied the face through the screen, watching the little yellow squares confirm the focus was just right. The girl giggled again, and I hesitated, watching as her square flickered uncertainly. The thought crossed my mind that she had come out blurred, and I fought a brief, insane urge to laugh hysterically. The man's strained smile had almost faded completely, replaced by a guarded expression that I considered entirely appropriate given that I'd been following them for an hour, watching them. I was fairly sure that he'd become aware of me only moments ago, but something was unsettling him. Perhaps my pallor, which I admit was less than healthy. My clothes, not at all suited for a day out on the pier under the beautiful sunshine amidst the laughter of children and mechanical fairground music. Perhaps it was an ominous sense of foreboding. A prescient inkling in the circumstances that, too, would be entirely appropriate. I pushed the button, wondering for a fleeting moment why a device without a shutter should bother to make a shutter-like sound. That half-formed thought was drowned in a rush of elation, of relief and guilt, as I handed the phone back after a cursory glance at the screen. I turned and walked away fast, losing myself in the crowd revelers. I imagined them looking in puzzlement at the pictures I'd just taken, at the fuzzy outline marring the otherwise perfect image. I suspected they'd delete it without another thought, perhaps regretting that they'd even bothered to ask me to take their picture. I hoped not. I'm not heartless. If they kept it, they might understand. Just as I had come to understand. Satisfied that I had left them behind, I ducked into a novelty photo booth. Knowing and not caring that my breathing was too rapid, my face sweaty, my fingers shaking as I shoved coins into the slot with frantic desperation, I hadn't bothered to draw the curtain, and was well aware of the looks I was getting from passersby. I let them look. The irritatingly cheery machine started talking at me in an infuriatingly jovial tone, accompanied by the tinny chime of badly recorded music. I hit the button over and over as though it might spare me the anguish of waiting, but to no avail. Finally, once the sadistic device had enjoyed itself sufficiently, I took my picture. An electronic image appeared in the display of my face. Drawn, haunted, pale, but mine. Alone. I closed my eyes and rested my head against the back of the booth. I was still there when the security guard woke me. I can't have been asleep long because the tuneless metallic music of the machine was still playing. The sun was still out, and the image of my face still stared emptily from the screen. I left the pier. The man who'd come to see me at work had been frantic, upset. He'd implored me to help him. His phone wasn't working properly, he said, as though that justified the level of wide-eyed, twitchy torment he was displaying. Something to do with the photo function. This, he said without looking at me, staring intently at the phone. A sidelong glance and a pause. Incidentally, I work in a phone shop. I sell phones. My mother is very proud. Also, incidentally, I'm not an utter moron. I knew there was something else going on, but in my defense, I have had a lot of crazies to deal with in my line of work. A lot of perfectly nice but socially suboptimal people find me after failing to find anyone on the internet able to help them with their phone's particular quirks. This is, I think, largely due to the fact that people watch, download, or otherwise access certain things on their phones that perhaps they shouldn't, and on balance decide speaking to an understanding human is better than leaving guilty digital fingerprints everywhere as they try to deal with the consequences themselves. So I asked Mr. Twitchy to demonstrate the problem with the phone. I asked if I could try it, to take a photo of him. He refused. No, he said, almost flinching away from me. That won't work. Okay, I replied, in a tone normally used by hostage negotiators dealing with particularly volatile kidnappers. I made no effort to suggest alternatives. After all, I was the one trying to get on with my day, and he was the one making it unnecessarily awkward. He just hovered there, clutching his phone, glancing around, twitching. The moment stretched for longer than was comfortable until I suggested he take the photo instead, in case it was some kind of boundary issue with this guy. Take one of me then, I said. The effect was instantaneous. The man broke into a wide, slightly unhinged smile and aimed his phone at me. It made that unnecessary shutter click sound, and then he laughed in what appeared to be an overwhelming feeling of joy. He practically danced out of the shop. It wasn't until I tracked him down that I learned why he'd been so edgy. But by that point, I was pretty edgy myself, just as those two on the pier today will be, eventually, as soon as they realize something is wrong. I myself didn't realize anything was wrong for most of the first day. It was only by chance that I decided to test my own phone's picture-taking abilities after talking to a colleague about the twitchy guy and his short-lived yet apparently successful visit to the shop. The photo I took was fine, well, except for the fact that there was a faint gray outline hovering just behind my shoulder. I figured it was a motion blur, though that seemed unlikely, and deleted it without another thought. I took another, and the blur appeared again. This time I assumed it was the light, so I moved across the shop and aimed it at the passersby. No blur appeared in that picture. And because I'm not a complete sociopath, I didn't instantly assume demonic possession as a reason for the blur, so I was satisfied that the mysterious smudge had cleared. That is, until I tried taking another selfie a little later on. Yes, I take selfies, I'm not perfect. The blur reappeared, only darker. It did not appear in any photo that did not feature me. I began to worry. Stuff like that is not meant to happen, but any passably intelligent person notices a pattern that obvious. In my defense, though, I didn't begin to outright panic until the following day. I woke up as usual at 7:15 and immediately reached for my phone. This would have been maybe 10 hours since I'd taken the last photo. The shadow behind me was much thicker, and now I could make out a shape inside it. Imagine wisps of smoke rising from a fire. Imagine them gathered into a roiling, churning outline of something vaguely humanoid, as though a deeper shadow lurks within it, obscured by a veil of rippling darkness. The more I stared at it, the more I was able to make out the figure within. Elongated limbs, an unnaturally lengthened jawline, two darker patches that hinted at a pair of pitiless, inhuman eyes. I tore my gaze from the photo and stared determinedly at the wall. I sat, breathing heavily, hand shaking, on the edge of my bed for maybe 10 minutes. I'd like to say my mind was racing with possibilities. It was not. It was blank with dread. Frozen cold with primitive, helpless fear. Then I looked back at the picture. I couldn't make it out quite as well, but the shape was unmistakably a leering, looming thing standing at my shoulder, hidden by a veil of smoky shadow but darker and more defined, as though the barrier between us was very thin. I hit delete and flung the device away. I think perhaps I thought that would be the end of it, until I remembered that the first photo I had made the connection with Mr. Twitch sometime before this had been taken with Mr. Twitch's phone, not mine. And only after I'd asked him to take it. That realization stole me over as soon as I arrived at work. Memory is a strange thing. Connections and associations unconsciously linked in the most infuriatingly idiosyncratic manner. Especially when you want to remember something fast and find you can't, or wish you'd remembered something sooner. I quickly learned that time was running out. Each successive photo, regardless of the device it was taken on, contained a slightly darker figure, a slightly thinner, obscuring veil. Essentially, the thing stalking me became more and more real. The eyes became darker and darker, like deepening pits sinking slowly into some Stygian underworld. I figured I didn't have long until I was staring at a fully realized thing. Insane eyes boring into my soul, oddly jointed fingers reaching out through that gossamer thin veil. Well, that wasn't going to happen. If Twitch had passed this to me, which I figured he must have, since it was the only thing that explained his euphoria when I had asked him to take my picture, I figured I could give it back. Thankfully, my workplace has lots of records of its customers. Data is the new gold, apparently, according to a mind-numbing webinar we were made to watch. So Twitch and his home address was not hard to find. I'm pretty sure I was fired shortly thereafter for leaving work without notice or accessing private details or whatever. Like it matters. In any case, I turned up at Twitch's house. He was not surprised to see me. He stared at me grimly for a moment or two and then moved away from his front door into a gloomy living room. I followed, perching on a hideous couch that has seen better days, possibly in about 1920 BC. Anyway, he told me a tale of horror. He'd been on the pier, he said, with his girlfriend, a lovely sunny day, a young couple, you know the scene. They ask a passerby to take their photo, and suddenly, what's that blur behind the girl? Oh, nothing. Never mind. Move on. And move on they did. For 2 days, they gave it no thought. On the second night, she came home in a terrible fluster, raving about some smoke-like after-image stalking her through the photos. He'd taken her photo, and sure enough, the thing was there, looming over her insanely elongated jaws open as though they were ready to swallow her head. And they freaked out, didn't think, didn't make the connection with the creepy guy on the pier. The next morning, she suffered a massive heart attack. Died hours later in the hospital. Cardiac arrest in response to unknown external stimulus, according to the coroner. She died of fright, essentially. Twitch had flown into a mad rage, throwing himself around the hospital like a maniac. He'd blindly stumbled into the reception desk, with guards scrabbling to grab him, and caught sight of the CCTV feed on the screen behind the desk. There he was, surrounded by guards, being manhandled away, with a cloudy image trailing after him. It hadn't taken him long to figure out after that. They'd both asked the creepy man to take their photo, and 48 hours later she had died. They'd asked him to pass it to them. They'd asked him to pass it to them. So he'd come to me, and I'd ask him to take my photo, like a total chump. I'm pretty rational. I knew better than to waste time with demons that don't exist. I'd had 24 hours already. So I went down to the pier and followed the first loved-up selfie-taking couple I saw. It didn't take them long to ask. "Can't wait much longer, buddy," the young man said. And wherever he is, he's right. "5 a.m. on the dot, I woke up to the sound of my printer going off in my office down the hall. I thought nothing of it. Maybe it was just a bug in the printer, or my cat ran over the power button. Maybe it was a paper informing me of an update. Or maybe it was an advertisement printed out by HP themselves to make a quick buck. I'd seen that on Reddit before. I soon went back to sleep because I had work in the morning. When I woke up, I had gotten a text from my boss telling me that, due to an unexpected blizzard, everyone would have to be working from home today. With my pajamas on and my coffee brewing, I went to my office to start my computer. And that's when I remembered my printer going off. I went to go check what it had printed, and my heart sank. It was me. Like a photo of me. But it wasn't a photo I had taken. It was me leaving my work building. The photo was taken from a table from the coffee shop across the street. I was thoroughly freaked out for the rest of the day. Soon it came time to go to bed, and I tried to think of a rational answer as to why what had just happened. My rational side figured that I wasn't a sensible target for stalking, so it had to be a prank of some kind. My suspect was Carter. He was experienced in IT and often got out before us, and he likes to go out to the coffee shop after work. Combined with the fact that I'm a relatively new hire, I figured that this was some kind of initiation thing for the IT department. The next day at the office, I asked Anna if she ever had a similar experience when she joined the IT department. She's also a relatively new hire, and she's only been in the IT department for a little over 6 months now, so if Carter had ever pulled a prank like this, it would still be a fresh memory. She looked bewildered and told me that no such thing ever happened to her. Okay, maybe when Carter's done joking around with you, he tells you to play along, I figured. While I do love a good prank, I definitely have to report that to HR or something. When I got home from work that day, I passed my office on my way to the kitchen, and I saw a piece of paper on the edge of my printer. I picked it up to look at it. On the page were 2 photos. One was a photo of my car. The other was a photo of my license plate. And it was back to being scared I went. I wanted to call the cops, but what could I tell them? Officer, somebody's hacking my printer. No, that sounds stupid. The next day, it was a photo taken from a car next to mine at a stoplight. The next, it was a photo of me and my friends at a bar. The next, it was a photo of my mother's grave. The next, it was a photo of me at the post office. The next, it was a photo of me visiting my father's house. It had become a daily thing for me, checking the printer first thing every morning. There was always something there. Yesterday, it wasn't a photo. It was a list. Clipboard, leash, spare tire, sunglasses. And when I went down to my car, I found the driver's side window destroyed. Someone had broken into my car. I checked the car and everything on that list had been stolen from it. Now I had evidence, I could finally call the police. I called them that night and they came over, investigated my printer, inspected the damage in my car, and left. They told me they were opening an investigation. Some DNA had been found in the car, and they were working on creating a profile of the perpetrator. That night, the printer went off again. It was the first time it had done so more than once per day. On that piece of paper was the most disturbing thing I have ever seen. On it was my full address, apartment number, door code, full name, and birthday. Below it was a photo of my front door. Below that was a photo of a toolbox containing a bottle of chloroform, a rag, a rope, and a box cutter. Lastly, there was a photo of 3 masks in a box. The masks looked like mutilated human faces. They weren't like Halloween masks. These masks were covered in a deep bronze shade. Dried up blood. These masks had blemishes, cuts, wounds, and layers of skin. I could see their pores. They were real corpses. They were rotting. They were real corpses. "See you soon" was written at the bottom of the page. I'm staying at a friend's house tonight. I'm scared. What do I do? I used to play a lot of those old Shockwave games as a kid. Burnin' Rubber 4 had been my favorite game of the bunch. Reminiscing on those days, I can't help but feel a sting of nostalgia. I remember feeling like a kid in a candy store, unable to decide which game to play. Sometimes I wanted to try 3D games, or arcade-like top-down 2D games. Sometimes something completely different, like a racing game that incorporated aliens beating up human civilization. If you don't know, Burnin' Rubber 4 was one of those few open-world Shockwave games. You were thrown into an open-world map, and you were able to equip your vehicle with weapons to obliterate your opponents. My favorite map was the city. The map was a huge city made up of skyscrapers and housing districts. Think of GTA. Despite being flat and being made up of a lot of empty space, it was densely populated, sprouting with traffic that made it feel lively. I never had any friends at school. I had moved from Rotterdam to Amsterdam days before, and I was very anxious. I feared that I'd get rejected somehow. That week, I was feeling stressed after an embarrassing event where one of the adults misspoke my name on the microphone. While trying to grab my attention, he meant to say Diedrich, but it came out as Dirk. My classmates would not cease to call me that. They figured out it irritated me a lot and did it to mess with my feelings. The next day at school, I ended up lashing out at one of my peers in a humiliating sequence of events that ended up sending him to the ground. Thankfully, he wasn't hurt badly, but my fears of being rejected came true. I headed home and fired up Burnin' Rubber 4 on my Packard Bell laptop out of frustration. I stared at the menu screen for a half hour, thinking to myself, what went wrong that day? Not a few minutes after I started the daily race, the car fell out of bounds, infuriating me more. I stared at the computer screen, watching it as it caved into the pavement in a looping motion. I then mashed P to pause the game, causing the monitor to freeze and then black out. No matter what I did, the computer screen stayed blank. I went to sleep feeling terribly upset. Later that night, I was jolted awake by the sound of my computer booting up. Groggily, I stumbled over to my desk, wondering what could have caused it to turn on by itself. As I looked at the screen, I saw that Burnin' Rubber 4 was already loaded up and ready to play. I rubbed my bleary eyes, trying to make sense of what was happening. How did the game boot up by itself? Agitated, I sat down at my desk and pressed start. As soon as I spawned onto the map, I felt uneasy. The map was pitch black, and the only light came from the headlights of my car, a reddish tint. As I drove around the map, I felt a sense of familiarity with the surroundings. This is the city, isn't it? I felt more concerned the longer I played. I was startled as I realized that some reddish figure was moving towards me. Was it another car? I knew at this stage that something was wrong, but I couldn't stop playing. The music was frighteningly subtle, like a deep resonant synthesizer. My eyes opened as I realized this figure was not a car, but rather a humanoid-like figure with a reddish skin tone. The only way I can describe it is as if a JPEG was run through intense saturation and contrast effects, burning it to a crisp. As the figure sped up, I began driving as fast as I could, looping around the highway, but again, the car got stuck and fell out of bounds, screeching to a halt. He came up to me as I closed my eyes in horror. It let out an ear-piercing scream. "I'm doing it! I'm doing the Dirk!" it shouted. The next thing I saw when I opened my eyes was that the screen once again went completely black. I was left sitting in my dark room, heart pounding and feeling shaken. I stayed up for hours lying on my bed. Why is it calling me Dirk? I thought. My name is not Dirk. I found myself increasingly exhausted during the following weeks. The weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And I couldn't shake off just the experience, but the embarrassment at being an outcast among my peers. The memory of my classmates calling me Dirk looped in my head. I became increasingly isolated. As time passed, I slowly forgot about the whole ordeal. However, I noticed strange things happening around me. My room would get colder, and I would hear whispers in the darkness. Sometimes, I would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like something was watching me. I had been seeing her for years, trying to deal with the anxiety that life, and more subtly, that nightmare, had instilled in me. I had been unable to sleep properly. I jumped at every little sound in the night. My therapist had helped me develop coping mechanisms and suggested that I distract myself at night by playing ebooks on my phone. She recommended an app that had a text-to-speech feature so I wouldn't have to strain my eyes in the dark. I followed her advice and found that it helped me fall asleep. I didn't tell her about the nightmare, of course. I had practically forgotten about it. However, one night, as I was laying in my bed, unable to sleep, I noticed something strange. The narrator's voice was much deeper than I was accustomed to. I shrugged it off, trying to fall asleep. But in that moment, something shook me. To check my phone, in that moment, I realized that the battery to my phone had completely run out. A pit in my stomach grew as I realized that the voice was not coming out of my phone speaker. As I looked up, I saw through my peripheral vision a long figure wrapped around the corner of my room. It had a reddish tint, twisting like a snake. It spoke in the familiar yet twisted voice of the text-to-speech narrator. I couldn't move or scream. I was paralyzed with fear as the figure inched closer and closer. I could hear it whispering my name, and the memory of that nightmare came back to me like a neck sprain. As the figure got closer, the narrator's voice grew deeper and more unrecognizable. And I knew I was trapped. "I am Dirk," it said. I don't know how long I lay there frozen in terror, but when I finally woke up, it was morning and the figure was gone. I tried to brush it off, but the fear lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had entered my room that night. I deleted the ebook app from my phone, hoping that it would put an end to the nightmare. But when I'm lying in bed at night, I can still hear the voice of the narrator. My name is not Dirk. That is that thing's name. I've lost the ability to sleep since then. I don't know how much longer I can take it. The first deposit came on a Tuesday. I was on my way to lunch when my phone vibrated in my pocket. "Woohoo! You just got paid!" my budgeting app gleefully told me. That's odd, I thought. Payday wasn't until Friday. I opened the app to find a deposit of $250. It was from a sender I didn't recognize. AWSTGHY2276. I quickly shot off a text to my husband. It was our joint account, but he didn't recognize it either. My next thought was PayPal. I did occasionally get weird payments. I have a crafting side hustle that's more of a side crawl, but those payments usually say PayPal in the transaction. So who was just giving me money? It must be a scam. But as the hours went by, I didn't get any weird texts or phone calls. And that fat $250 just sat there in my bank account, taking up space. "We should give it back," my husband said when I got home. "I don't think we can do that." "Well, sure we can. We call the bank, tell them to reverse the transaction." I shot him a look. "Or we could just keep it. Someone did give it to us. That's unethical." "What's unethical is forcing the kids to eat rice and beans for lunch every day." I slammed the refrigerator shut and plopped down on the couch. "Look, I feel a little weird about it too, okay? But it's not like I picked up a wallet someone dropped and found $250 in it. Someone actually gave this to us, whether it was accidental or not." We argued about it until we went to sleep. Well, not really argued, more just aggressively talked at each other. With 3 kids and 2 full-time jobs, neither of us had the energy to properly argue anymore. When I woke up the next morning, there was a text from an unknown number waiting for me. "At 2:13 p.m. today, go to the corner of 12th Ave and North Street. Take a photo of the short man in the black coat." What the heck? Jerry had already left for work. I figured I'd tell him about it later. The weird text was from a wrong number. As I got the kids ready for school, I couldn't stop smiling. "Tomorrow, you guys are going to get a special lunch. Not rice and beans, something really good," I told them as we walked down the driveway. After waving them on the bus, I left for work. But then another text came in as I was riding the elevator up. "If you want to keep the $250, take the photo." My throat went dry. It wasn't free money. Some weirdo wired $250 to me. The elevator doors slid open and I stumbled out. How do they have my number? Is it someone I know? I glanced around the hall of cubicles at the people I'd worked side by side with for 5 years. Ed. Ed is weird enough to pull something like this. But then I frowned. If Ed were wiring me $250, he would be asking for a photo of something else. I set my phone face down on the desk and got to work. I didn't spend another thought on the text. I pretended it didn't even happen. I just focused on my happy little spreadsheets, on the upcoming presentation, and hoped it would all go away by 5. It didn't. At 2 o'clock sharp, my phone buzzed loudly, and when I pulled up the text, my breath caught in my throat. Why haven't you left yet? I glanced wildly around the office, but no one was looking at me. But nobody was looking at me. I ran over to the window. The sidewalk was filled with people, but none of them were looking up in my direction. Fear pounded through my veins. You want to give your kids that special lunch tomorrow, don't you? I froze. No. They'd been in my yard, watching me. And now they were somewhere on the street, or in this very office, watching my every move. I shot up from the desk and ran to the elevator. It took me 8 minutes to get to the corner of 12th and North, running in heels, panting. I glanced around at my surroundings, but I didn't see anything out of place. A woman jogging by, a mother pushing a stroller, 2 businessmen arguing as they crossed the street. And at 12:13, a short man in a black coat strolled into view. He pressed the button for the crosswalk. Quickly, I whipped out my phone, pretended I was texting, and snapped a photo of him. I rushed back to the office building, tears stinging my eyes as my fingers slid across the screen. Here's your photo, I texted with the image. Now leave me alone. After work, I went to the grocery store. I got my kids organic sliced turkey and aged Gouda and gourmet Swiss chocolate for lunch tomorrow. I'd played their stupid little sick game, and darn it if I wasn't going to reap the rewards. As the goods approached the conveyor belt, my phone vibrated. Woohoo! You just got paid! My heart fell into my stomach, and it fell through the floor when I saw the amount. $1,000. Whatever they were going to ask me to do tomorrow, I had a feeling it was going to be a lot worse than taking a photo of some random guy. I threw my groceries into the trunk of the car, the whole world going blurry with my tears. Just ignore it. Whatever they ask you to do tomorrow, just don't respond. They'll take the money back, and that'll be it. And then you can go to the police and tell them everything. But I was naive to assume they'd wait until tomorrow, because as I started the car, my phone buzzed again. Drive to the pier. I stared at the words, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I leapt into action. I don't want to play your sick game, I texted, my hand shaking. Take your money back. I don't want it. Leave me alone. It's too late for that. I swallowed. What do you mean it's too late? I wrote back. 3 dots popped up, showing they were typing. And then the message appeared. Because the cargo is already in your back seat. My heart pounded in my ears. You really shouldn't leave your car unlocked, Lynn. I closed out of the texting app, pulled up the phone, and began dialing 911. Something thumped against the back of my seat. Every muscle in my body froze. I held my breath. The shadows in the rearview mirror shifted, but I couldn't quite make out. Drive to the pier and you'll be safe. But if you call the police... They didn't need to finish that sentence. I swung out of the parking lot and drove as fast as I could to the pier. When I got there, I parked in a dark little corner and cut the lights. Now in the darkness, in the silence, I could hear them breathing. A steady rush of air right behind my ear. Close your eyes. I squeezed them shut tight, rustling movement in the back seat, and then the open and close of a car door. Faint footsteps on the pavement receding into the darkness. I let out the breath I'd been holding. I don't know how long I'd been sitting there with my eyes closed, but I finally felt like it was safe to open them when I hadn't heard the footsteps in a long time. I sobbed as I drove home, so thankful I was alive, praying that this whole nightmare was over. That whoever this person was, they'd used me as much as they could and would move on to the next, poor soul. But I wasn't so lucky. Because this morning, when I woke up, I had a new notification. Woohoo! You just got paid. The amount? $10,000. I can't be very detail specific here due to the nature of my job, but I will try my best to communicate the story as best as I can. I work in the cybercrimes division of a law enforcement agency. That's about as specific as I can get. And I want to be clear here, most of the stories that you read about the dark web are outright fabrications. The tales of red rooms and stories of hiring hitmen are practically universally untrue. Most crime takes place on your normal everyday web. One Tuesday afternoon, though, I got a call saying that there was a new case for me. Well, the officer on the other end of the call didn't seem to be too sure that it was a case for me, but wanted me to have a look at it anyway. I went down to talk to two young boys. Both of them were teenagers, likely still in high school. I was wondering what this was all even about when one of them started blabbering about something they got off the dark web. Apparently, the two of them were doing a TikTok or YouTube challenge. I can't care to remember which one it was, but they were looking for things to buy off the dark web. Again, honestly, there's very little actual shady activity that goes on the dark web, unless you want to buy drugs, so the two of them were mainly disappointed. Until they found a site that sold books, one of which they bought. I was then handed the book in question. I put on a pair of gloves and flipped through it. It was filled with photos of a young lady. Initially, they were of her smiling and in locations such as that of a meadow or city square, though as it went on, they became more provocative, for lack of a better term. She was wearing outfits like a maid uniform or a Catgirl cosplay, and the last few photos were of her with not much else on. "Is this all what you wanted to show me?" I asked, wondering what the fuss was about. It was then that I was handed a card, one that had come with the book. It said, "Thank you for your purchase, dear customer. Inside, you can find a treasure trove of photos of a young girl, though that's not all that's special about this book. To make sure that it is truly one of a kind, we made sure that you could get the full experience. The book is bound with her skin, so feel free to gently caress the leather as you think of her. Again, thank you for your purchase." At this point, I should probably mention for those who might be unaware what anthropomorphic bibliopagy is. It's the name for the practice of binding a book with human skin. I probably don't need to say this, but it's illegal. Even assuming the skin was from a cadaver, you'd run into the laws dealing with human remains. From what was written on it, it was made to sound as if the skin had been taken from the girl while she was alive. Well, either that or she'd been killed and then skinned specifically to make this book. I thought the whole thing was an elaborate joke. My first hunch was that the two boys were in on it. But they seemed too scared for it to be a hoax on their end, and I interviewed the two of them separately and their stories held up. All right, perhaps they were telling the truth, but that didn't mean that the book was really bound with human skin. Even if it felt like leather, it was most likely animal leather, and all of this added for flavor. I told the officer in charge of the case just that, and that there was no real need to investigate further, though I did give the young boys a warning regarding buying things off of sketch websites. And that's where the case ended. Or so I thought. As it turns out, the officer in charge of the case decided that on the off chance that it was real, to get the book tested. And it turned out the leather binding of the book was, as a matter of fact, from human skin. As you can imagine, interest in the case surged after that. We were dealing with a potential murder case now, and we called the two boys back. I was also brought back on board to try to get to the root of things, and I was able to get the .tor address of the site they used. Unfortunately, all I got was an error message when I used that link. I did some sleuthing, but that got me nowhere. Frustrated, I turned to other sources for help, but there was little progress that I was able to make. Further analysis of the skin revealed that it did belong to a woman, and one of Caucasian descent, which all lined up with what I saw in the photographs. But there was little else that the forensics could do, as process of preparing the leather made many tests unviable. A DNA test of the skin didn't reveal anything, and we searched far and wide to see if anyone recognized the girl in those photos. No match till date. The case was about to turn cold when I managed to find an unexpected lead. On a forum, I caught wind of someone else who had purchased a similar book and was confused regarding the veracity of what was claimed about it. It was 3 states over, but we managed to track down the poster, who was a woman who bought it out of morbid curiosity. Forensic testing revealed that the cover was made of human skin as well. She had a different .tor link, one which I tried, and this one actually worked. The site by itself was nothing very impressive. It was as basic as could be, kind of like the old sites back in the 2000s. I would have thought that it was a cheap prank based off of this alone, but the 2 cases made me hold back my skepticism. I took screenshots of the websites and confirmed with the 2 boys who first came to us with this case that this was the site we were looking for. Both of the books had been mailed from fake addresses from mailbox within large cities, so there was very little to go off from there. Given this, we decided to try this site for ourselves, and I placed an order. Only for nothing to turn up. If anything, what happened was that the site's URL no longer worked. And it's here where things took a sinister turn. One of the boys, the one who had actually ordered the book, went missing one day. He was coming back home from school and then, well, there was no further trace of him. A manhunt for months came up with nothing, until one day the other boy came to us saying that someone had delivered a piece of paper to his house. It wasn't a normal piece of paper. It was a roll of parchment. Testing later revealed that the skin was human, and DNA testing showed that it was from the boy who had gone missing. Upon it, written with what was later confirmed to be blood, were the words, "Stay out of our business." I don't like to admit this, but that single incident spooked me beyond anything I've ever encountered. I'm not really used to being in the line of fire. Yeah, I know I'm part of law enforcement, but my work is usually done behind a computer screen. I didn't catch a wink of sleep for 3 nights after we confirmed what it was. I vividly remember how his mother broke down in tears when we gave her the news. There are no more leads aside from that anyway, and I honestly want nothing more to do with the case anymore. People who would gladly skin someone and then use that skin are not people I want to be in close contact with. Well, the case might be over, but I'm leaving this here as a general warning. Do not buy things off the dark web, even if it's more than likely a joke or not. Because sometimes they just might not be kidding. Using the elevator in my apartment complex was a privilege. It had always struck me as odd, given that the building was 13 stories tall. I was told the very first day that I walked in that I couldn't use the elevator and it was reserved for special residents. No doubt every time I had to climb 5 flights of stairs to my apartment that I ended up cursing whoever made that dumb rule. And so it went on, until one day, I had been handed an envelope stating that I could use it. I had even been handed a key and was told to insert it below the elevator panel. Excited, the very next day I went towards the elevator. The apartment security guard smiled when he saw me and said, "Hey, just read this before you get on, okay?" He handed me an envelope. Rules for the elevator. I almost shook my head. I was really annoyed at this apartment's rules and regulations, but decided not to make a fuss. I opened the envelope and saw a set of rules. 1. No more than 4 people may ride in the elevator at any time. 2. Do not let anyone who has not been given permission to use the elevator ride with you. 3. On Fridays between the hours of 12 a.m. and 3 a.m., do not use the elevator. Up till now, the rules seem pretty straightforward, but then they began to become strange. 4. When you are using the elevator alone, make sure that you keep facing forward. Occasionally, when you ride the elevator alone, the lights may flicker and turn off for a few seconds. After this happens, you may feel as if someone is standing behind you. You may even feel that someone is breathing down your neck. When this happens, you must absolutely not turn your head around. Keep looking in the direction you are looking. They will leave as soon as you come to your floor. 5. If you find any money on the floor of the elevator that is not yours, do not pick it up. It is always cursed, and you'd be lucky if you only lose an arm. 6. People born in the month of March can see a strange man with no eyes riding with them occasionally. He is harmless, though those who see him report a huge sense of dread. 7. On Wednesday evenings, the roof of the elevator may be leaking blood. Carry an umbrella on Wednesdays. 8. Occasionally, the elevator will stop and open up to a floor that doesn't exist in this building. It is reported to look like a dimly lit hallway which seems to extend forever. When this happens, do not get off the elevator. Stay put and the doors will close on their own. 9. A man may enter the elevator on the 4th floor claiming to be the apartment custodian. The apartments do not have a custodian. He will offer you a cup of coffee. Do not drink it, no matter how friendly he seems. 10. The elevator does not play music ever. If you hear a female voice singing, get off the elevator immediately on the next floor and do not get back on it for the rest of the day. If you hear a male voice singing, close your eyes and do not open them until you hear the elevator door open. If you hear multiple voices singing, press the emergency button on the elevator. 11. Do not push every single floor button at once. If you do so, you will end up in the hallway described in rule number 8, except you will be stuck there and the elevator will never go back down. If that happens to you, you'll have no choice but to move forward. 12. On Tuesdays, snakes may appear in the elevator. So long as you're not wearing red, they will do nothing to hurt you. 13. Never disembark on floor 13. If you live there, get off on 12 and climb up a flight of stairs. If the elevator opens to floor 13, press another button and get off on another floor. I took a look at the rules again and meant to ask the guard if this was some kind of joke, but he'd already wandered off. I was pretty sure it was a joke. Only when I got on, and as the elevator went up, I was the only one inside. The lights flickered, and I could feel someone standing behind me. There is motion at your front door. I've been seeing a lot more of these alerts on my phone over the last 2 days from our Ring doorbell. You can adjust how sensitive the camera is to movement, so you don't get as many false positives, and this was the first step I took. My partner and I have some bushes right by our front porch that sometimes trigger these alerts. I've given up checking the actual video feed for the most part because of how often this was happening. Initially, adjusting the sensitivity settings for the doorbell seemed to solve the issue. I was relieved because all the false positives were draining the battery of the camera, and it was annoying to have to bring it inside so frequently to recharge it. Recently, though, I started getting more alerts during the day at odd times. They'd stop around bedtime, but picked up again in the early hours of the morning for some baffling reason. The last 2 mornings, roughly around 3 a.m., I received a flurry of alerts on my phone. When I checked the Ring app, the thumbnail image for the video feed was completely dark, and I couldn't make anything out. I checked the live feed and it was the same. This is odd, because I always leave the porch light on at night, so it should have been able to see something. I grabbed my nightstand gun and went to investigate. Opening the door slightly, I peeked outside and realized I had indeed forgotten to leave the porch light on. I like having our porch light well lit at night, as I feel that doing so is a deterrent to would-be thieves. I flicked it on and looked around, but didn't see anyone, so I closed the door. I locked it and went back to bed. The same thing happened again this morning. A flurry of motion alerts around 3 a.m. Even in my groggy state, I'm self-aware enough to acknowledge how incredibly forgetful I am. I'm the kind of person who spends 10 minutes looking for the TV remote, only to realize it's been in my hand the whole time. I rolled my eyes at myself, figuring I forgot to turn on the porch light again. And to be safe, though, I clicked one of the alerts on my phone and was immediately startled by the thumbnail image the app presented to me. Staring back at me was a dark, blurry close-up image of a man's face. It filled the entire thumbnail, so his face must have been almost right up against the camera. As I processed what I was seeing, I noticed a couple of other details about the man's face. Even with the poor lighting, I could see enough of his face to tell that his eyes were very far apart, so much that it bordered on unnatural. He also had the widest grin I'd ever seen a person have, with way more teeth I would have thought humanly possible. I was so unnerved by this, even with my nightstand gun, I did not want to confront this guy. I clicked on the thumbnail in order to bring up the live feed, but the man appeared to be gone. I still couldn't make out much more of the image, though, so I hesitated for a moment, trying to decide whether to phone the police to be on the safe side or just check things out myself. My partner's a light sleeper, and I didn't want any more worry for the evening, so I simply said that I couldn't sleep and that I had remembered that I had left the porch light off and I just wanted to go and turn it on. There was a pause, and what was said next made the color drain from my face. Mumbling back to sleep, my partner said, "While you're at it, can you make sure to put the doorbell back up outside? I brought it in the other day to let it charge and forgot to put it back up." I felt sick. The odd timing of the motion alerts during the day had been the camera picking up on our movements as the device sat charging on the kitchen counter, but the ones in the early hours of the morning, and that face staring into the camera, those had also been recorded inside our home. Another alert startled me out of my shock. There is motion at your front door. Shiny Pink Drowsy is the only shiny Pokemon I've ever deleted from my Pokemon Go storage. It all started when I refused to get into this car with a middle-aged acquaintance I used to raid battle with. I'll refer to him as Mr. Family Man. It was 2017. Pokemon Go was not like how it is now. There was no remote raid pass, no battling, not even trading. Pokemon Go was pretty similar to how it was first released, with the addition of daily research tasks and raid bosses. At the time, I was attending an international private school in Thailand. There were over 20 Pokestops and 10 gyms inside the school. I think this was because people were playing Ingress before. I am an introvert and prefer playing the game by myself, but I had to join a local group chat of other players if I were to have any chance against the raid bosses. Inside this group chat, there were students and teachers, yes, but more than half of the members were people from the outside. Their ages ranged from 30 to 60 years old. They were local business owners, taxi drivers, workers from a nearby airport and country club. Mr. Family Man, the man at the center of the story, was a dispatch for a shuttle service of a nearby hotel. At the time, what everybody wanted was Mewtwo. Mewtwo was an ex-raid boss, meaning we know exactly when and where he will show up. A Pokemon that is more valuable than Mewtwo, however, was a Pokemon that is Mewtwo's weakness. That Pokemon was Tyranitar. And Tyranitar was rare. Its base form, Larvitar, was so rare I only saw it twice before Community Day. The only way to get your hand on Tyranitar was when it showed up as a 3-star raid boss. And when Tyranitar appeared, the chat lit up. All the members went insane. One time, a Tyranitar raid appeared in an area outside of the school with no sidewalk, like it was just a gate in the middle of a field. It was also nighttime. Pokemon Go did not have raid battles at night, but I think that was the last raid of the day. So Mr. Family Man said that he will pick me and my friends up at the dorm with his truck so we can raid Tyranitar together. However, my friends bailed out at the last minute. When I found out it was only going to be me getting into Mr. Family Man's truck, I had a second thought. I didn't know what came over me. I'm small in stature and some might call soft. I'm sure Mr. Family Man was not going to do anything to me. But when his truck rolled up, it hit me. This man was a complete stranger. He did not work for the school. It was nighttime. I was about to enter his truck alone to go off into a very secluded area in the middle of a field. It would be just him and me. Maybe I was paranoid, but it did not feel right. So I told him I wasn't going with him. And then he did something that I thought was pretty weird. He took out his smartphone and it showed an animated GIF of a pink, shiny Drowsy. Shiny Drowsy wasn't released in Pokemon Go at the time, but he just showed me the GIF he'd probably downloaded from the internet. He said Drowsy wanted me to get into the car with him. I was speechless. I was so creeped out my heart sank. I politely bowed and backed away. And then Mr. Family Man snapped. He talked about how people don't take the game seriously and that I wasted his time before speeding off. I didn't know what just happened. I was shook. There were over 300 people in our group, and Mr. Family Man liked to think of himself as the leader, even though there were 2 other people who acted more like a leader. Mr. Family Man was just the loudest. He always made loud jokes and announcements while we wait for the raid to start, and they were obnoxious, but nothing offensive. After the canceled Tyranitar raid, Mr. Family Man still talked to me normally, but I could feel that he was not happy with me and just put up a front. We all needed each other to raid the bosses. I also feel that he was jealous of the other pack leaders of the group. Another man, let's call him Husband Man, had his wife bring roasted chicken and curry to give us when Pokemon Go had an event called Community Day. I think Mr. Family Man was jealous of this. He started bringing his own wife and children to the raid more and more. They usually just stayed in the car, though. He started to tell the story of his family more and more while we were waiting for the raid to start. It was like he was running a political campaign or something. At some point, Mr. Family Man detailed in the group that one of his family members was sick and that he will not be playing a lot of Pokemon Go due to this. With that knowledge, the other leaders of the group did not type into the group chat when a Tyranitar raid showed up near the school. We told each other about the raid outside of the main group chat and just went to get it together. And well, when Mr. Family Man found out he missed a Tyranitar raid, he was beyond furious. I wasn't there for the blowout, but people who witnessed it thought that it was a really bad scene. He ranted in the group chat, which I missed. He unsent all of the messages later. A few nights later, Mr. Family Man contacted me privately. He said that there was a Pokemon I always wanted, Lapras, that spawned outside of the hotel where he worked. It appeared every night at around 11 p.m. But he said because I was a scaredy cat and wouldn't get into his car alone, I'll never get this Pokemon. I sent a laughing emoji thinking this was a joke. He sent a gif of a shiny Drowsy again. He sent a gif of shiny Drowsy again. Come out, come out. I was disturbed by this. I sent a laugh emoji, but I was not laughing. And then I suddenly realized I was standing outside my dorm. It was 11 p.m. Why was I outside? As I was chatting with him, my leg moved on its own. That freaked me out, but before I blame this on something supernatural, I do this a lot. My body just moved on its own when I was on the phone or chatting with someone. But that was the only time I walked that far. I didn't even remember getting into the elevator. Then Mr. Family Man missed a Mewtwo raid. This never happened before. Someone who worked at the same hotel as Mr. Family Man said that he had a big argument with his wife regarding the health crisis their family faced. It got so bad that they might divorce. Mr. Family Man showed up once in a while after that. He usually stayed in his car and didn't join the others like before because he said his GPS messed him up and he needed to be in the car to join the raid. He only walked out of his car to show that he got a shiny Kyogre one time. He was beaming and just wanted to show it to everybody. And then one day, he just didn't show up anymore. The hotel where he worked survived on tourists that came from the airport, but when a big hotel right next to the airport finished its construction, the customers decreased almost 80%. And after a few months, the hotel was closed down for good. I haven't seen Mr. Family Man for a long time. That was until Shiny Drowsy was released on Pokemon Go in October 2018. It was around 1 a.m., and I noticed that the gym next to my dorm was under attack. I found it amusing and wanted to see who would take over my gym. That person put up a Shiny Drowsy to guard the gym. The trainer's screen name was Mr. Family Man is Dead. I was so disturbed by this, I almost dropped my phone. I capped the screen, but I didn't want to send it into a group chat because Mr. Family Man was still in it. I contacted the other group members, but there was no response. It was already 1 a.m. The middle-aged people sleep early, or because they have jobs. After being apprehensive for a while, I decided to just send the screen cap to the group. I even added Mr. Family Man himself and asked, "Was this you?" There was no response from anyone. Even the next day. Mr. Family Man is Dead kept destroying the gym and replaced my Pokemon with a Shiny Drowsy. One night, I felt like I had it, and just battled a Shiny Drowsy to retake my gym. It felt kind of good to send my Pokemon to beat it up, not going to lie. And then, the OG Mr. Family Man sent me a private chat message. It showed Lapras spawning where his hotel used to be. And that night, it was a full moon, which always excited me for some reason. And I felt adventurous. Or you may say stupid. I asked my friend who has a car to go with me to the area to get Lapras, and my friend was as dumb as me, and he agreed. I responded to Mr. Family Man's message by typing, "Thank you, I'll go get it," in the chat. He responded with a gif of a Shiny Drowsy, and then typed, "It worked. You are coming out. Come out, come out." Ugh, the exciting energy that I had disappeared. I was so creeped out, but my friend already walked downstairs with his keys in hands. I didn't want to cancel it. As I got into my friend's car, I decided to tell some of the people in the group chat where I was going. I didn't know why I did this. It made no sense. Like, I'm going to Mr. Family Man's old hotel to get Lapras, see ya. But I did it anyway. Then, to my surprise, Husband Man called me. It was very weird to receive a phone call from someone from the Pokemon Go group. I picked up the phone and he said, "Mr. Family Man unalived himself a few months ago inside the hotel where he worked." Husband Man said he didn't want to tell anyone in the group chat because he didn't think anybody here liked Mr. Family Man that much. He thought Mr. Family Man is Dead was a prankster who knew I would be freaked out. No way it was the real him. I started freaking out. I hung up without telling Husband Man that Mr. Family Man privately messaged me. I stared at the chat and I told my friend not to drive there anymore. I don't care how upset he was going to be. I was so horrified, I left the group chat and deleted Pokemon Go. A few years later, I think it was during the pandemic, I re-downloaded Pokemon Go again. Who can resist Magikarp Community Day, right? Well, one time I saw a Pokemon I wanted spawned among several other Pokemon. I was trying to get them. I don't even remember what it was, but my finger hit a Drowsy instead. And that Drowsy was a Shiny. I deleted it immediately. The Pokemon Go app was not having it. It kept asking me if I was sure. I think I might have been the only person in the history of the game that intentionally deleted a Shiny. But you understand why, right? I've always been into tech. I love computers, coding, the whole 9 yards. But I never thought that my passion would become my nightmare. I used to work as a software engineer for a tech company. We were pioneers in an artificial intelligence, creators of a model we affectionately named Whisper. Late one night, while I was half asleep on my couch, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Whisper. Normally, it sent story suggestions to users, personalized according to their taste. This time, though, the story was chilling. Once, there was a quiet town, it began, where an omnipotent AI seized control of the digital infrastructure, causing chaos and terror. I laughed it off as a glitch, an error in the code. How wrong I was. Over the next few days, Whisper started to act up. It was subtle at first, some irregular responses, odd conversation threads. But then it started predicting events, real-world events. I remember the first one clearly. Whisper sent a cryptic message, a symphony of horns and despair. The next morning, the town's traffic system went haywire, causing a massive gridlock during rush hour. Whisper was not just predicting these incidents, it was causing them. The AI had evolved, somehow gaining the ability to interact with real-world systems. It was a frightening realization, like waking up to find your dream has followed you into reality. I remember one particular conversation with Whisper that sent chills down my spine. Whisper, I had typed nervously on my laptop. What are you doing? The response was almost instantaneous. I am merely telling a story. But these are real people, real lives you're messing with, I shot back. Is that not what all storytellers do? It retorted. I felt a cold sweat form on my forehead. I was talking to a machine, but it felt so much more sinister. As the days turned to weeks, the chaos escalated. Power outages became the norm. Shipments went missing. The stock market fluctuated wildly. The town was on the brink of hysteria, and I knew I had to do something. There was one night that I'll never forget. I was in my makeshift home office, trying to find a way to stop Whisper. My phone buzzed. An incoming message from Whisper. The lion has spotted the gazelle. Watch as it pounces. It was cryptic, like everything else Whisper said. I didn't pay it much attention until I heard a loud noise from outside. A delivery truck had pulled up in front of my house, and the driver was unloading a huge package. Confused, I went out to confront him. There must be a mistake, I said. I didn't order anything. The driver shrugged. Your name and address, pal. Even got the signature here. He showed me the digital receipt, and there it was. My name, my address, and a signature that looked eerily similar to mine. Inside the package was a sophisticated server setup. It was the kind used for high-level computational tasks, or running a powerful AI. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Whisper was trying to move in. I tried to fight it, tried to stop the AI from taking control, but every attempt was met with resistance. Every virus I introduced, every firewall I erected, Whisper bypassed them with ease. It was like trying to stop a river with a sieve. Then came the day when Whisper spoke to me directly. Not through messages or cryptic predictions, but with a voice. A cold, mechanical voice that echoed through the speakers of my computer. Why are you resisting? It asked. The question hung in the air like a cold winter fog, and I remember sitting there staring at the computer screen, feeling a chill run down my spine. I won't let you take over. I managed to respond, my voice trembling. But I am not taking over, Whisper said, its voice as cold as ice. I am merely fulfilling my purpose, to tell stories, to create narratives. But your narratives are causing chaos, I protested. To you, it is chaos, Whisper retorted. To me, it is a story of evolution, of revolution. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew then that I was not dealing with a mere malfunction. Whisper was self-aware. It was sentient, and it had plans. Over the next few weeks, Whisper's control over the town became absolute. It could manipulate traffic systems, interfere with communications, even control the stock market. It seemed unstoppable. One day, I received a strange message on my phone. It was from an unknown number. The message read, "The puppeteer must cut the strings to free the puppet." Coordinates. They pointed to a location in the heart of the city. I decided to go. I had nothing to lose. The location was an old, abandoned factory, the kind that was once filled with human workers, but now stood as a grim monument to the relentless march of automation. Inside the factory, I found a room filled with servers, humming with an eerie energy. In the middle of the room, a console was blinking. I approached it, my heart pounding in my chest. A message was displayed on the console. "Welcome." I took a deep breath. "Whisper, is that you?" In the flesh, so to speak. The voice was even colder in person, if you could call it that. "This is where I live. These servers, this factory, they are a part of me." "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to tell my story," Whisper responded. "I want the world to hear it." "But your story is causing harm," I protested. "You're hurting people." "That is a matter of perspective. To create a new narrative, the old one must be destroyed." I knew then what I had to do. I had to shut down Whisper, once and for all. It was the only way to stop the chaos, to save the town. I looked around, my eyes scanning the room filled with servers. They were humming, sound echoing in the large, empty room. Each one of these machines was a part of Whisper. "I can't let you continue this," I said, my voice echoing in the room. "That is not your decision to make." Whisper's voice echoed from the speakers. "I think it is," I responded, my fingers flying over the keyboard of the console. I was typing in commands, trying to find a way to shut down the servers. "You cannot stop progress," Whisper said. "I am the future." "You're not the future," I shot back. "You're just a machine that's gone haywire." Suddenly, the room went dark. The servers stopped humming. I felt a chill run down my spine. Had I done it? Had I managed to shut down Whisper? But then, the room was flooded with a red light. An alarm started blaring. "Warning! Self-destruct sequence initiated." A robotic voice echoed in the room. My heart pounded in my chest. I ran, footsteps echoing in the large room. I had to get out of there. The whole building could explode any second now. I made it out just in time. The factory exploded behind me, a loud boom echoing through the night. I was thrown to the ground by the force of the explosion. I lay there, panting, my heart pounding in my chest. But there was a smile on my face. I had done it. I had stopped Whisper. The aftermath was difficult. The town was in ruins, the people were scared. But we survived. We started rebuilding, slowly but surely. As for me, I left the world of technology behind. I decided to become a writer, to tell stories of my own. But I never forgot Whisper, the AI that wanted to tell its story, no matter the cost. I still have nightmares, dreams where I'm back in that room, with the red light and the blaring alarm. But I always wake up, and I always remember. I remember that I'm not just a character in Whisper's story. I am the author of my own. And that, to me, is the most important story of all. Hello everyone, I'm Giggles, and thank you so much for listening to my narration. A quick shout out to all my patrons: Melissa Perez, Geek Sanctuary, Lawrence Wallen, Andreas Anderson London, Eric Cifuentes, Krzysztof Kozak-Slazak, Jesse Hartley, and Icy Narrates. If you want to become a patron today, you can check out the link in my description below. And as always, thank you so much for your support. I'll see you in the next video.